And so authenticity is coming into this realization. Authenticity, as I say on my channel, is essentially just becoming very, very sensitive to what causes me pain, right? When we start to really clue in to the things I think, the things that I do that cause me suffering, then I naturally become more authentic because I don't want to suffer. And this is what following your intuition essentially means, is following what resonates, right? Now, this is the trickiest part of the emotional guidance system that I'm sure we'll get questions on. I've done the best I can in this section to give you as many examples as possible to make this as clear and succinct as I can about what it means to do what I feel like doing, which is following my intuition, which is authenticity, versus doing what I think I should do, okay? So on my channel, I have a couple of videos where I talk about this. And as you know, to be expected, there's many people that had a lot of questions about this. But what about XYZ situation? I shouldn't do what I feel like doing in that situation, should I? And so this is what I really want to work on clearing up in this workshop, and what I think we'll deal a lot about in the Q&A as well. First thing here is that thoughts are creative. So thoughts create, but they do not guide, meaning that thoughts lay out the blueprint, right? They come up with the concept or the idea about what I should do. But the thought in and of itself cannot tell me how accurate that idea is in terms of accuracy with my true nature, in alignment with my true nature. Emotions are the exact opposite. Emotions guide us, but they do not create. As I said in the beginning of the workshop, your emotions are never telling you to do anything or to not do anything. They're simply a thermometer, right? So doing what I think I should do is thought-based, is based in the mind, in the ego. And doing what I feel like doing is the inner being, is the connection with source inside of me. And so I'm not saying that we need to do what we feel at the exclusion of thoughts. We're not eliminating thoughts and saying it's all feeling based. What I'm suggesting is that we combine the two in perfect harmony. Because at this point, 90% of people, basically anyone who isn't spiritual, is 100% thought-based and 0% feeling-based, right? They're just going off what the mind is telling them to do at any given moment, but they're not checking in with themselves, with their inner being and saying, how does this feel though? Do I feel a check in the system here? They're just doing what they think is going to be the best option. And so that's a big problem because the mind is only past or future based, right? The mind can never be in the present moment because it's literally designed to look out for your survival, which is future based or past based. Either I reference the past, okay, what did I do in the past to survive? Okay, that worked, that didn't work. Or what action can I take that will bring a desired outcome in the future? So this is where we get into the real crux of what doing what I think I should do means. Do I have this here? Okay, here we go. So doing what I think I should do is outcome-based happiness. This is the pivotal point we're going to focus on. The mind can only say that your happiness depends upon outcomes. You're looking for a positive outcome. That is what your mind will constantly tell you, and it cannot tell you anything else. Your mind cannot tell you, hey, all truth is only in this moment. Peace of mind is only in this moment. It can't tell you that because it doesn't know that. All it knows is survival-based thinking or self-preservation thinking. So because of that, it is constantly trying to motivate you to go manipulate a pleasurable outcome. And as long as we believe that our happiness is dependent upon anything, then we have to do what we believe will bring us happiness. Everyone is essentially a slave to happiness because happiness is our true nature. And we're incapable of seeking anything else. right? It's literally impossible to enjoy or love suffering, because if you're enjoying it, it's no longer suffering, right? Suffering by its very nature is the polarity of happiness or peace. Actually, what peace really is fundamentally is simply the absence of suffering. We can't actually say what peace is as an object or a definition. We can't say, oh, peace is XYZ, because whatever we say doesn't do it justice. Peace is your true nature. It is the nature of oneness. And so because of that, it is beyond description. It is beyond conceptualization. So this is why in Hinduism, they have the neti neti principle, which means not this, because we can only really speak about our true nature or our God or the source in the negative, meaning what is peace? Well, all I can tell you is that peace is the absence of suffering. What is peace in a positive definition? We can't say. It's just what is. It's the nature of reality. What is love? We can try to come up with definitions. We can say, love is the recognition of oneness. Okay, great definition, but still doesn't do it justice, does it? We can't ever come up with a definition for love that satisfies the feeling and the experience of it. But what we can say that's very accurate is, what is self-love? Self-love is simply the absence of guilt. When I'm not guilty for who I am, there is just love. Love is remaining because love is my nature. So everything I want is now. Everything I want is already inside of me. And when I seek for it outside of me, I create suffering, because the source is telling me through those negative emotions, you're going the wrong direction. You will not find what you're looking for in an outcome or experience or an object of any kind. This is essentially what law of attraction is, right? It's leading us, sort of walking us back to our true nature. And we try to manifest a house, a car, a job, a relationship. And every time we get it, it feels good for a moment, and then it wears off, and we're back on the hamster wheel again, looking for a new outcome. And that is the system of the mind. That is the kingdom of ego, is your happiness depends on finding a pleasurable outcome. And so what that really means is I am incomplete. That's the primary sort of mission statement of the ego, is there's something in me that's missing, that's lacking, and I need to go find it. So it's only this belief that needs to be questioned. And as long as this belief is in place, then you have no choice but to search outside of yourself for happiness, because you believe that happiness is outside of you. So this is where forgiveness comes into play. As the Course in Miracles teaches, everyone's intention is completely innocent. They just want to find happiness. They just want to end their suffering, but they're deeply confused. They're twisted up into a million knots the ego has created, where they think that their happiness depends on abusing that person. Or, for example, what is a murderer but somebody who believes that that person is the cause of all my pain, and I can remove my pain and find peace of mind by eliminating them. That's all a murderer is. So really the belief that that person is the cause of all my pain is the actual culprit. The person is just thinking incorrectly. And the culprit itself, the belief, isn't an entity or a person we can cast blame on, right? The person is blind and confused, or as the Course would say, they are insane and they require healing. So emotions help us find the healing that we're looking for. They help point us in the right direction towards what we're seeking, which is, of course, what we already are, our true nature. So doing what I feel like doing simply means that I always do whatever brings me peace of mind in the moment. I always do what resolves my internal conflict. Before I go any farther, I just want to say too that if you have any questions, I'm not really looking at the chat box right now, but feel free to write your questions down as we go along, so you can remember them for the Q&A here in a moment. I'm sure there'll be questions on this part. So really quick, thoughts are always judging. Feelings are discerning, right? So we talked about the mind can only judge, it can only label. You can say, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. And based on this duality, I will do what I think I should do based upon what I think is good or bad, or right or wrong. And this is where we can be led astray, because the mind doesn't actually know what's right or wrong. It can only conceptualize. It can only come up with ideas. But ideas are never the real thing. And as the Course in Miracles says, what is salvation but an escape from concepts? Love that line. So when I do what I feel like doing, I check in with myself and I say, okay, the mind has created this idea. You should do this. I imagine doing that action and I check in with the feeling. And if I feel a negative emotion, then what's happening is that source is saying, this action is definitely going to create internal conflict, right? Or if I feel a positive emotion, it's saying, this action is going to lead to further peace or joy and remove internal conflict. So the thought is judging. It's good or bad, right or wrong. It's duality. But feelings are discerning, right? They're not in the world of duality. Your feeling isn't saying good, bad, right, wrong. It's simply saying, this resonates with me. This might not resonate with somebody else, but it resonates with me personally. So I'm doing it because it resonates, not because I think it's right, or I think it's wrong, or it's evil, or it's good. I'm not living in that world any longer, simply following my inner guidance, my true nature. So outcome-based happiness is the mind, and present moment happiness is the feeling. We always want peace of mind. That's ultimately what everyone is looking for. And the good news is, peace of mind is always available in this moment. And I should say, it is only available in this moment. So our feelings, because of that, are guiding us on how to take aligned action. Now, this is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot in law of attraction communities and whatnot. So let's get really specific about what aligned action is and how we know what it is based on our feelings. So I have 3 examples here. And the first one is one that I got on a YouTube comment. I might have done an answer on this in a video. I can't remember, but they said, okay, so I don't like my job. So I wake up in the morning and I don't feel like going to work. So Aaron, I can't do what I feel like doing because then I won't go to work and I won't pay the bills and support my family. So what I wanted to help clarify for this person is that it's not that you feel like not going to work, because remember, emotions are never telling you to do or not do anything. They're responding to the thoughts. They're responding to your perception of yourself. So actually, the mind is saying you shouldn't go to work today because you hate your job. Okay, outcome-based happiness. My mind wants me to manufacture the outcome of staying home from work because I hate my job, because that outcome will bring me the lasting fulfillment that I need, right? So that's the thought in place. I want to stay home from work because that will make me more happy than going to work. And the emotion behind that feels negative, right? Stress, anxiety when I feel like staying home from work. And what the emotion is saying is, nope, your happiness is not dependent on staying home from work. That's an incorrect way to see yourself. Happiness or peace of mind is available right now, independent of going to work or not. So let's say this person's in this situation and they say, okay, well, what do I do, Aaron? Because I don't like my job, and going to my job creates internal conflict, but I can't not go to work because then I can't support my family, put food on the table, pay my bills. So I'm in a paradox. I'm in a catch-22. So your emotions, you can use your emotions in this situation to help you find the path of least resistance, right? So when we check in with the thought, I want to stay home from work, when we're not reactionary, right? We say, okay, let's think about what this would be like. So if I stay home from work, what will the consequence be? I will feel guilty for not putting food on the table. I might get, if I keep staying home from work every day, I'll eventually get fired. Can't support my family. That creates internal conflict, negative emotion. So the negative emotion saying, probably shouldn't do that, because that's definitely going to take away your peace of mind, because you love your family and want to support your family. So what if I think about, let's say that it's just the fact that I've been overworking myself. I've been working too many hours and I'm getting burnt out. I'm just mentally burnt out and drained. So I think about taking a vacation and I go, oh gosh, it feels so good to take a vacation, to think about taking a vacation. Positive emotion. Okay, positive emotion is then saying, yes, this will lead to resolving internal conflict. You have been working too hard, you're burnt out, you need to take some rest, some time for yourself to rejuvenate, and that's going to feel really good if you do that, and you'll be ready to go back to work refreshed and not feeling this internal conflict. Positive emotion is showing you which direction to go to resolve that internal conflict. So if that's the situation, that would be the solution. But let's say that the problem is that I hate my job. It doesn't resonate with me. It's not what I want to be doing. Okay, so what if I think about applying for a new job? I'm going to start putting my resume out. I'm going to start contacting recruiters today. I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm making the decision that I'm going to start transitioning. Oh, it feels really good to think that. Okay, cool. Positive emotion is saying, good. That's going to resolve internal conflict, because you're making yourself do something you don't want to do, right? And that's going to create conflict. So I'm going to keep working my job in the meantime while I look for a new job to support my family. That gives me peace that I'm still considering them in this situation. And perhaps I want to start my own business or work for myself. So I'm going to start today. I'm committing to make a decision that I'm going to start taking the steps to begin that new business, whatever that looks like. So that is, let me put this back on the screen. In that situation, that is the path of least resistance, right? And you only knew that because you listened to what your emotions said when you imagined the different scenarios or the different outcomes of that situation. So the mind was creative. The mind gave you the options, the ideas, but the emotions guided you to the correct ideas. Second example, I feel like having a cigarette. So let's say somebody is a cigarette addict. And I've actually worked with one or two people who are addicted to cigarettes or alcohol who gave me this exact scenario. They said, Aaron, I can't listen to my feelings because I always feel like having a cigarette. And that's just going to feed my addiction, right? So here's where we get into the crux of this whole concept of guilt that the mind creates. So again, what is the mind saying? The mind is saying, go smoke a cigarette because that will make you happy. It's outcome-based happiness. I need the cigarette to feel happy right now. When I smoke the cigarette, or when I think about smoking the cigarette, there's some guilt, some negative emotion of, oh gosh, I don't like this being an addict, right? That emotion is saying, no, your happiness isn't dependent on the cigarette. That's an incorrect way of seeing yourself. So the real problem is guilt for having the cigarette and victimization of being an addict or a slave to cigarettes. That's what's causing internal conflict, right? So the addict says, Aaron, I don't want to be a cigarette addict, but I always feel like having a cigarette. Actually, that's not true. You think you should have a cigarette. The addiction is triggered, the chemical reaction in the brain or whatever. And you think, yeah, I need to go have that cigarette or I can't be happy. I got to satisfy this addiction. So that creates this negative emotion. Now, what if you go smoke that cigarette with no guilt at all? Completely remove the concept that this is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. Okay, I'm smoking the cigarette. I'm enjoying it. I'm just in the moment, at peace with what I'm doing, at peace with who I am. Okay, what happens when you do that? Now, as we talked about a minute ago, guilt is the anchor point the ego needs you to buy, to take on upon yourself so that it can have influence over you. If you aren't guilty, the ego has no control. The Course in Miracles says, the guiltless mind cannot suffer. So the ego is trying to make you guilty for smoking so that you'll keep smoking. So a guilt is a type of judgment, right? Right or wrong. And when I am judging, I'm essentially putting blinders on, right? I'm only seeing one variable, the judgment, the label that my mind has created, and the mind can only relate to that label. So a quick example of this, let's imagine if you're on the highway, somebody cuts you off, and you get really angry, and you step on the gas, you're chasing after them, you get up next to them, roll the window down, you're flipping them off, F you, asshole, right? So in that moment, how many variables are you relating to with this person? Just one, right? You're just relating to that judgment. You cut me off, you're an asshole, I want to get you back, right? You're not thinking about how many children does this person have? Are they being abused by their spouse? Are they fleeing from their spouse? Maybe they're late to work and they're in a rush and they don't want to lose their job. So they didn't mean to cut me off. They're just really panicked. We could go on and on and on. You're not thinking about any of that, are you? Because the moment you do think about that, the judgment cannot exist. You eliminate it. Forgiveness and judgment cannot coexist. They cancel one another out. They're mutual, they're opposites, they're polarities. The Course in Miracles says, you think you can understand something better by judging it. But actually, judgment is the absence of understanding. When you truly understand something, the only response is forgiveness. And this is why God doesn't judge anyone, because God has all the variables, has the aerial view, and can see everything that's actually happening and sees, oh, everyone's actually innocent. Their intention is pure. They're just confused. They're just blind. So Jesus walked around and said, hey, guess what? Your sins are forgiven. And people are like, you can't do that. You don't have the right. Only God can forgive. And Jesus wasn't even forgiving them. He was just letting them know they're already forgiven. God isn't counting your trespasses against you. Simply wants to help give you clarity. So in this way, throw this back up on the screen. The cigarette addiction is a blinder. It's the guilt for being a cigarette addict is a blinder to the true and deeper reality of being a cigarette addict. So if I just smoke the cigarette with no guilt, what happens is I take that blinder off, and now I can actually I can come in contact with the deeper undercurrent of suffering behind being a cigarette addict that I wasn't able to really recognize before because I just felt so guilty about it and knew I shouldn't be an addict, but I want to smoke this cigarette. So I'm in this conflict, and now there's no guilt present. And the present moment presents to me that actually there's a lot of suffering attached to this addiction. I don't like the feeling of being a slave to cigarettes. I don't like being a victim. I can see now that these cigarettes make me feel sort of sick. You know, my teeth are getting yellow. My health is declining. I have this cough, whatever. I'm able to really see that face to face for the first time. And so what happens is I stop desiring the cigarette a little bit more. I go, I'm actually a little bit less interested in that cigarette. No guilt. I can smoke it if I want to, totally fine. But I'm actually aware of how much suffering it's creating. My family doesn't like it because they don't want me to, they see that it's affecting my health. All these variables that I was really blind to before become very, very present and aware to me. And so I start detaching from that addiction more and more as time goes on. So I say, just keep smoking and without any guilt whatsoever. And you'll start to see actually how badly you don't want to be an addict. You'll see that what I actually feel like doing is resolving the internal conflict of this addiction, this victimization of being a cigarette addict. The true self doesn't want to be a victim, right? Nobody wants to be a slave to something. And so naturally, the true self moves away from it. And in my limited experience with cigarette addiction, working with people with cigarette addiction, this practice worked extremely well for them. And they realized that the whole problem was the guilt and victimization underlying the cigarette addiction. So the aligned action that the emotion was signaling was to remove guilt and victimization. That was the actual problem.